Welcome to the next lesson on evidence for evolution. In this particular lesson, we're going to be looking at biogeography, developmental biology, and structural morphology. This describes why evolution is an appropriate model to use to describe how we have come about. So, biogeography is the study of a distribution of organisms, and that's providing evidence for the past. So, these 5 species of birds all look very similar, all have a number of similar features. How is it that all of these flightless birds, the ostrich, the cassowary, emu, kiwi, and rhea, all flightless birds, how is it that they exist on 5 different continents? Initially, the Earth was present, or the hypothesis is that initially the Earth was present as one supercontinent. Over time, those continents broke apart into what we know today. So these supercontinent was all together, meaning one common ancestor gave rise to these birds, and they were placed in different environments. They had different selection pressures, which resulted in different species being formed. The biogeography talks about the distribution of organisms, providing evidence for the past. They're all flightless birds. They couldn't have flown there after the Earth began. They must have all begun together, and then all of the continents or all of the land masses spread apart, providing different selection pressures, creating different species. So, other evidences for evolution, structural evidences for evolution, are known as homologous features. So when features of organisms, so for example, limbs or wings or body types or feeding habits, when those features are fundamentally similar and they're based on a common ancestor, we call them homologous features. So they have different functions, but they've all got similar structures and they've come about from divergent evolution. So if we look at what's known as the pentadactyl limb, the pentadactyl limb describes how organisms all have various similar structures in their morphology of their forearm or their arm. So the humerus of the human and the cat and the whale are similar in their shape, and they have all come from a common ancestor which has diverged and split up over time. This suggests that we have all come from one species. The next one here, analogous features. So organisms that do not have common ancestry in the recent past, we are all of course related a long time back, but in the most recent past, organisms which are not related, but they have similar structural features, they're known as analogous structures. So they have a similar shape or function to one another, and that's as a result of convergent evolution. So the penguin and the shark are not related as of recent, nor is the dolphin, because they're mammals compared to fish and birds. However, their fins are structured in similar ways. So this is an example of analogous features which suggests that evolution has created or has selected for these fins as they do similar functions in these different environments. So we have divergent evolution where a common ancestor is split and the features have resulted in homologous features, so similar features, different function, whereas these ones here, convergent evolution is a result of 2 parent species, different species, therefore they can't interbreed to produce viable fertile offspring, and they have got more similar as a result of the selection pressures placed on them in their environment. Other evidences for evolution are known as vestigial structures. So some organisms, and the whale is the most common, they have vestigial or ruminant structures, which they no longer do or serve a function. Here is the pelvis in a whale. It's very similar to the pelvis in other creatures, pelvic bones, as you can see there. However, it doesn't serve a function for the whale. So this suggests that we all came from one particular species, as other organisms, like humans and apes, they have a pelvis and they make use of it. This suggests that we all came from one species where the pelvis was once used, but now no longer used in the whale. So it's diverged to become different from the common ancestor and no longer has use for it. This suggests evolution is a model that may describe how we have come about. Developmental biology. That talks about comparisons between early ages existences, so the embryo, and how we have spawned or were created from a common ancestor. If you look at the embryo and you look at the development of various organisms, they have very similar structural characteristics in terms of how they develop. Look at the fish, the salamander, the pig, the rabbit, and the human. It's very difficult to tell the difference between the embryos in the early stages. As time goes on, the embryos become increasingly more different and the features they develop are different. But the early stages, the embryo is very similar. This suggests that we've all come from one common ancestor because the embryo is developing in a similar manner. Again, you look here at the mammals. These organisms all develop in a similar way, suggesting we come from a common ancestor more recently than what these ones have. These are the ideas that you need to know for this lesson. Structural morphology, so homologous and analogous features, and being able to describe what they are and the type of evolution they're involved with. So divergent for homologous and convergent for analogous, and comparative embryology and how that provides evidence for evolution, as well as being able to describe biogeography. This is what you should be able to do to measure your understanding of the lesson, identify structural evidence, and draw and explain the difference between homologous and analogous structures as evidence for evolution.